Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So this is going to be a long overdue video that I did promise a while back, but I just kept being super busy. So basically I already did a video where I kind of went over the best alternative paths for Korean challengers in case if you do want to basically start exploring Abyss for the first time and you want to just double up. So I did list that for Korean challengers, which is still going to be available in the same spreadsheet, which paths I do recommend. Basically, I assume that path 1 is done because that's everybody's initial completion. And I also wholeheartedly recommend staying away from path 4 with any of these challenges, because that is by far the hardest path and you do not want to do it with a potentially compromised team. So we basically split in between paths 2, 3, and 5, if you want to follow them exactly. And then I kind of list which paths are better or easier, and I suggested some teams here. Now, as a quick side note, once again, I do not, absolutely do not recommend you try and finish a run for the Symbiote Challenge. The main reason is because Symbiote Challenge, revive-wise, is quite easy. You can get it done with like 15 revives, 20 revives or so. But then if you carry on, obviously you're going to use more revives to get to the collector, and collector is likely going to be more expensive than the entire run up until then. You would be much better off just backing out and redoing it with a proper team. So do not try to finish up the Symbiote Challenge. That is my personal recommendation. I have had several people come up to me in streams or in chats and say that they should have listened to me because the collector was absolute nightmare and cost a fortune. So do not finish the Symbiote Challenge. The two challenges that you do want to finish are Korean Challengers and Mutant one. So I made this video for Korean Challengers already. Now it's time to take a look at Mutants. And basically the end kind of like comparison is pretty much the same. Except with Mutants, you categorically want to stay away from Path 2. And the reason there is CMM. CMM will effectively cost you probably more than Collector does on a Mutant run, because only kind of cost-efficient way to get her down is with a Mystic Champion. And if you do a Mutant Domination challenge, you cannot bring in a Mystic. So Path 1 and 2 are automatically out. Do not try that. Do not do that. Huge waste of time, huge waste of resources. You will hate yourself for doing this path with Mutants. So that leaves, again, ideally staying away from Path 4, because that is overall the hardest path, where you do want to have your best team possible available. We're split in between path 3 and 5, and it's basically the same. Especially path 3. Path 3, you have so much liberty on your team. In between team of APOC, Strife, and Magneto, you can cover virtually every single fight. Perhaps maybe Bishop will be a bit trickier. Bishop fight would be trickier, probably cost you some items. It is doable with APOC and Strife as well. But in between these three mutants, you can do every single fight on this path. Again, this is not what you have to follow exactly. I have listed here all of the mutant champions that are there. I highlighted the ones that realistically are probably going to end up being used in Abyss. So I listed, this is a list of every single mutant, I believe, available in the game. And I highlighted the ones that, you know, most people would reasonably bring in, like Strife, Apocalypse, Professor X, Cable, Magneto, so on and so forth. So in this one, you can choose what you want to add. My personal recommendation would probably bring in Professor X and Magneto House Effects to make the Collector fight easier. Or you bring in potentially Gambit or Goldpool to try and stun chain this Bishop and try and burst that down in one of those spots, and then bring in like Magneto House of X to make Collector fight easier. It's kind of up to you what you do there, but in between these three champions, both of these paths are doable. Now, I do think that Path 5 is harder. I do think that Path 5 is going to be harder to do than Path 3. It's about the same length, because we do have some more quirky opponents, namely like Gladiator Hulk, which again can be done by APOC. But again, in between these three champions, you can kind of like cover it. Before we go any further, before we finish the discussion, I also do think that because Arena Challengers is a harder challenge overall. Korean Challengers will be costlier. Korean Challengers will be longer and more annoying. If you want to use both of the runs to cover new paths, then do path 3 with Karina Challengers, because that is, the easier path, so to speak. And then do path 5 with mutants, even though path 3 would be easier for mutants. Mutants are going to deal overall with path 5 better than Korean Challengers would deal with path 3 or 5 overall, is what I'm saying. Korean Challengers is genuinely the most expensive kind of run there. So I do recommend doing path 5 with the mutant team if you want to do both. If you do want to do both kind of like new lanes in your exploration. Again, I have listed all of the champions here that are in mutant class. Again, do not try to replace, for instance, Magneto with somebody else 1-for-1. That's why I have made a brand new empty sheet here for you, where you can list in whichever champion you have, and then you can try and match your team for every fight. Your goal is, if you cannot have all of these 3 champions available to you, your goal is to cover every single fight on the lane. So this is also meant to be used by you to kind of fill out that team you pick, which counters you're going to select. This is just kind of vague suggestion with basically these three champions kind of covering every fight. Also, a lot of Strife and APOC fights are interchangeable. In fact, most of them are interchangeable unless they involve Unstoppable in most cases. There are some specific things to note, like, for instance, if you use Strife against Hyperion, you need to know that Strife wants to be basically played parry heavy kind of until you get to level 3, until you get some charges, because you do need to make sure that you have enough charges, and it is a fairly finicky fight. You also need to know that against Champion, Strife had issues removing Champions Unstoppable, but it should be fixed with this previous update. I can't confirm that. If it's not, then Apocalypse is capable of doing this fight as well. And again, many of these fights are interchangeable in between Strife and Korg. Quick side note, you might not know this one, that Strife is actually very good against Havoc, because his heavy attacks, some hits of his special attacks that are energy based, and his medium attacks that are energy based also prevent him from taking any passive damage back. So if you make sure that those are the strikes that you use against Havoc, when he detonates plasmas on you, you will take no damage from plasma detonations. The only thing that you need to know about Havoc fight is not to have shock on Havoc. Do not try to put that passive shock from level 1. That's it. Alternatively, you can just use APOC, and APOC can do just fine as well. But again, it's in between yourselves which champions you want to use. This is kind of like my suggestion. Again, many of the Strife APOC fights are interchangeable. You can figure it out for yourself in case you do not have overly highly ranked Strife, but you have, super ranked APOC. So here we are. This is the sheet. I will link to it in the video description and in the pinned comment. I hope it is useful to you. But again, use this side of the spreadsheet. Write down your team, figure out which champion is going to take which fight, make sure that you have every single fight covered, and good luck. See ya. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about the